Welcome back to the special coverage of the U.S. elections on Arise News. I'm joined by the host of Arise Exchange every day, Monday to Friday, 7 p.m., Mr. Boason, Omofaye. Boason, you're welcome. Great to have you on. We've got the all-important map behind us as we look at the updates from the U.S. elections. Electoral votes, 238 for former Vice President Biden, 213 for U.S. President Donald Trump. Boason, what about Africa? How does Africa fit into this narrative of what's happening here? Any ripple effects? How do you see things?
Well, I'll just tell you a little bit of what I've been hearing from analysts who were speaking about Africa. The story is a whole lot different. Africa, the first issue that right now as we're talking about electoral issues or the votes in the United States, there are a whole lot of issues on the African continent. From Tanzania, where the election was just finished, the incumbent got another, President Magufuli got another term. The whole lot of opposition being harassed over there. Some folks being arrested. It's happening in Uganda as we speak. In Ethiopia, there's a whole lot of military action happening around the northern part of the country. In Ivory Coast, just behind Nigeria's back door, you find the Ivorian election held last Saturday. President Alassane Ouattara got a whole swing through the elections because the opposition largely boycotted the elections as it were. Some folks, according to reports, were leaving the city, Abidjan, and moving on to the villages. They were thinking of reprisals of what could happen. So there are a whole lot of issues around Africa. Then you talk about the issue with Mali, which was a military coup not too long ago. Then if you move on to the north of Africa, in particular, you talk about the problem between Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt over the $4 billion dam. President Trump seemed to be a whole lot more interested in Egypt because he is very cozy with Egypt, by the way. So he wants Egypt to move in militarily and enforce some actions against Ethiopia in building that dam and putting it into use. Ethiopia is taking it diplomatically, so we have some quiet over there. Then this morning he's still talking about, 2 days ago, just before the elections in the U.S., he was talking about additional sanctions for Sudan over previous sanctions that had happened. Now, so a whole lot of issues. He's a lot more cozy with Kenya, for example, in East Africa. The officials of Kenyatta administration had gone to U.S. August, September, looking for a new trade deal. So you have a whole lot of mixed bag sentiments about President Trump. He has quite some supporters on the African continent. He does. Yes, he does.
So imagine that the Egyptians would be rooting for him to pull through in this election.
The relationship between the United States and Egypt goes way, way back. The regime of Abdel Nasser and the rest of them goes all the way back. Egypt has always been a major broker between North Africa, the Middle East, and the United States. So he's always taken a very critical position. If you look at the economy of Egypt as well, it's been well supported by the Europeans, in particular by the US, and of course Saudi Arabia on the other hand. So it's been very critical. But right now, what Africa will be concerned about, what are these two candidates? Whoever wins, what will be the key issues for Africa? First, the World Health Organization, headed by an Ethiopian, Ghebreyesus. What will be the position? Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of that. The International Criminal Court is also there. The World Trade Organization with Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala in the lead. The U.S. vetoed that. If everyone remembers how the U.S. also vetoed the Akiwumi addition of the AFDB until it got through after an independent inquiry was done and all of that, and it moved on to get. So it's a whole lot of process here, and Africa is looking at, it looks like the U.S., because of the position of President Trump in the last 4 years, he seemed to, and this is quoting analysts, he seemed to prefer a little bit more of what we call autocratic administration. So the U.S. seemed to have been very soft, and some folks on analysts this morning spoke about Nigeria's NSAS protest over the last few weeks ago. Right. There was no very hard stance from the United States. President Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden of the Democrat tweeted about the situation. There was no hard position that everyone had expected from President Trump. That did not happen. Hillary Clinton tweeted, Joe Biden tweeted. We had a few more tweets about that NSAS. There was nothing very strong against the Nigerian authorities or whatever on that particular issue from President Trump. So all of this, what will be in Africa will be more interested in where are the economic issues, trade.
Right.
what would be the U.S. stance if there are autocratic leaders, folks who are supposed perhaps to spend 2 terms in office, constitutionally speaking, seeking the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th term? What is the relationship between the United States and Europe, where a whole lot of countries in Africa have very critical relationships? UK and Kenya, for example, UK, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Morocco, and France, and the rest of European economies, Egypt, Greece, Turkey, also a very critical play when you look at the relationship in the north of Africa. Yep. And then you look at the Horn of Africa between Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia. U.S. has a very critical interest. China is a major interest in that corridor. They're building a whole logistics hub there for the Chinese. So they're using that hub to step into Africa. So it's a whole lot. And Ethiopia leans a little bit more towards the Chinese rather than the Americans.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of dynamics, geopolitical play, who brings cash to the table, who am I going to do business with, where is my major hub? If you talk of a major transatlantic flight in Africa, you talk about Ethiopia, and that takes you straight to Asia.
Indeed.
So quite a whole lot here so it's a whole lot of sense here for whoever wins this election, whichever way, Africa will have to make his stance known.
If Trump was to prevail, because again the numbers are still coming in, it looks like he favors more. You've mentioned his relationship with Egypt, Kenya, so he favors more bilateral trade agreements, one-on-one agreements between countries. What do you think that does to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is more supposed to be multilateral? Do you think it threatens it in any way if he's to tempt a Kenya or another nation to do more deals with the U.S. as opposed to focusing more on the region?
He wants to cherry pick. He wants to know who is going to bed with and who he doesn't like to go to bed with. And one African country that seems to be playing this a little bit is Kenya. Yesterday, Kenya signed a post-Brexit deal with the United Kingdom for its agriculture, food products, agro-allied, horticulture, and what have you. And this seems to be upsetting the rest of the East African community, Burundi, Tanzania, Uganda, and others, who felt that this ought to have been an East African community EAC's deal rather than a standalone with the United Kingdom. But being a very big economy, Kenya has moved on with that. Then you find the deal with the trade deal with the U.S., which was done in Washington in September. A bit of a pullback there for Kenya. But of course, we also, President Kenyatta at the White House. Yesterday, we saw his images, his pictures also with Boris Johnson and other UK officials when he went to secure that deal. So it's a whole lot of who President Trump wants to deal with. Will that change? Africa perhaps seems to be a bit more interested in democracy. But again, if the rhetoric from Washington and the White House seems to tolerate autocrats, totalitarianism, bilateralism over multilateralism, then everybody's going to begin to look at the body language of the world's #1 president in doing business. But Africa is more interested right now in what happens with the COVID-19. And this COVID-19, the way President Trump and his administration seems to have handled it, looks like it's been a bit of a problem for him as far as this elections was concerned. His reputation and his profile of been handling the virus seems to have been affected by the voting pattern so far. That's what some of the analysts are saying. And that could be a major issue when the rest of the votes comes in and who eventually wins.
Fantastic. And in fact, lastly, Boason, you mentioned COVID-19. We still don't have a vaccine. The takeoff of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, was held up because the vaccine the pandemic was still disrupting the nations. It looks like going into 2021, closing out this year, it seems like a lot is still hinging on that vaccine to come out before things move forward for a lot of African nations.
Well, what everybody was thinking was that, look, if we're not having a vaccine, can we have an orderly and very quality leadership that gives us an idea of how do we do the lockdowns, when are we locking down, when are we reopening, a bit of whole more organized. But I have a whole lot of, some sense of pity for world leaders, whether from Europe, UK, to the United States, because no one has this. No one has a template for this. The Spanish flu influenza, the world's economy and everything about the world was not the way we were. We are now way back with the Spanish influenza. So it's a whole ball game. But the type of leadership that was expected from the United States, the way President Trump had talked about the virus, whether using masks or social distancing, the way he seems to have been a little bit like a diastical about it, a little bit, well, whatever you can do, you don't need to do it, we need to move on. But those on the economic side seems to like the fact that, yes, he's looking at the numbers, he's looking at the stock market numbers, he looks at the current exchange rate. He spoke to what the Fed chairman should do about exchange rate and in terms of the dollar position against the Chinese. So he's more interested in the economy. He's interested in the stock market. Look at the stock market.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, Boason. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're looking at the Dow Jones Industrial there. It's the markets have opened up in a positive region, 0.84%, 233 points up in the green zone, 27,713 points there. So interesting to see how the markets will be reacting to the latest developments with respect to the U.S. elections. And of course, my thanks to Boason Omofaye, host of Arise Exchange, which of course folks can catch at 7 p.m. West African time, right?
Thank you so much.
It's
good to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. All right, so we're still covering the U.S. elections. We are still covering the aftermath of the drama that's been unfolding. Keep it here on Arise News as we continue the coverage.